Some spouses, some people who were married, were asking questions like, what if my husband needs me and I want to keep myself from sex and pray? And another thing that was going on was that married people were using sex as a weapon to fight each other. Your husband has a problem with you, and then you are vexed, and then at night you turn your back to him. And you say, we will see. You keep annoying me. That's why Paul talks here about conjugal rights. If you are married, take note of conjugal rights. And Paul will go further to explain conjugal rights like this. When a man marries a woman, let the woman know that her body does not belong to her anymore. Her body belongs to her husband. And the man, before you are married, know that your body doesn't belong to you. Your body belongs to your wife. So that if your husband or your wife says, okay, I want to use my body now, don't twist your face. Say, okay, oh God, have your body. Conjugal rights, right? Not privilege. That is the marital issue that was going at Corinth between couples. And then Paul also addressed the unmarried and the widows in verses 8 and 9, saying, to the unmarried and the widows I say that it is good for them to remain single as I am. So what was the question? These ones who are not married like that, are they qualified to be Christians? That's what they were asking. And that's what we ask today too. This one who is not married like that, why is she taking communion? Let her not dirty the piece of bread that will come to me. But Paul says what? It is good for them to remain single. If someone remains single, you are not sinning. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to burn with passion. Problem number 4, disagreements about marital principles. We will get the details when we start moving from verse to verse, from chapter to chapter, from verse to verse. Now let's identify the problem. Problem number 5, disagreement about food offered to idols. Paul addresses that in verses 8 and 10. 1 Corinthians 8:4. Paul says, therefore, as to the eating of food offered to idols, those things have been reported to Paul. In quotes, we know that an idol has no real existence and that there is no God but one. A Christian to eat meat that has been sacrificed to idols. In Kambe they may say nguma meat, nwarong meat. Is it okay for a Christian to eat meat that has been slaughtered in a nguma house and maybe some sacrifices performed on it? There was a big problem at court. But Paul is saying here that we know that an idol has no real existence. Meaning that what? If meat is coming from Gumba house, an idol has nothing in it. Because God is the one who owns everything. God is the one who truly exists. Idols don't even exist. So there's no problem. That's what he's saying. There's no God but one. There's nothing like Ngumba God. There's just the God of heaven. That's what he's saying. And then in verse 8 he says, food will not commend us to God. We are no worse off if we do not eat, and no better off if we do. So they were thinking that, okay, if I don't eat unclean food, then I'm better off. When I eat, I'm worse off. Jesus himself even said, it is not what gets into us that defies us, but what comes out of our dirty hearts is what defies us. That's the general teaching. And then Paul says, talking still about the same thing, but, underline this but if someone says to you, this meat has been offered in sacrifice, then do not eat it, for the sake of the one who informed you and for the sake of conscience. So when you go to someone's house and then he's giving you meat to eat it. Whether the person is a Ngumba person or a pagan or whatever, eat whatever, without asking questions. But if the person tells you, this is from Ngumba, say, okay, I have nothing to do with Ngumba, for the sake of the person and for the sake of conscience. Because Paul will say when we get into the details, even though an idol has no real existence, if you believe that an idol has a real existence, it will affect your conscience, and then it will cause you to sin. If your conscience is walking and telling you that, wow, an idol truly exists, and then you still eat, then you will somehow be sinning. Problem number 5, that's it. Disagreement about food offered to idols. Problem number 6, disagreement about the rights of apostles. He addresses that in chapter 9. Let's read verses 4 through 6. Do we not have the right to eat and drink? The we there is referring to Paul and Barnabas, because they were those who were being accused here. Do we not have the right to eat and drink? Do we not have the right to take along a believing wife, as do the other apostles and the brothers of the Lord and Cephas? This is what Paul is saying. Like the other apostles, Barnabas and I, we have the right to eat and drink. We have the right for the church to give us food and drink. We have the right to get married, Barnabas and I. But were they married? No. Were they taking anything from the church? No. Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working for a living? That's what he's asking. And this is what was the problem at Corinth. When Paul and Barnabas were apostles, they decided that they won't get married, so that they won't concentrate on marital problems, so that they will only focus on serving the Lord. And Paul would say that was a choice that they made. And then they also decided that they won't let the church pay them. They would rather do their business so that they will finance themselves. And that was a choice. And then the church at Corinth abused those their choices, saying that the reason why Paul and Barnabas will not take anything from the church is because their conscience tells them that they are not true apostles. If they receive anything from the church, they will be cursed. So they were spreading those false rumors. That's what Paul is addressing here. And in addressing that, Paul makes it clear that to support apostles is a right that they have from the church. Nevertheless, he and Barnabas choose not to have those rights. To be married is the right of an apostle, but they chose not to have those. And it was by choice. It wasn't because they were afraid of receiving anything from the church. That's what is going on. Any of his fruits, or who tends a flock without getting some of the milk. Verse 12. If others share this rightful claim on you, do not we even more? Okay. What Paul is saying is this. If the apostles that came after us to Corinth have this right to receiving support from you, Barnabas and I who planted the church, then we should have more rights. And then he says, nevertheless, we have not made use of this right, but we endure anything rather than put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. It's not because we are afraid that we will be accursed by the morning. It's because we choose not to have those rights. That was problem number 6. Problem number 7. Let me tell you what comes before. Paul opens this place by saying this. The head of the woman is her husband. The man. The head of the woman is the man, her husband. The head of the man is Christ. And the head of Christ is God. That's how he begins this. And then after that he gives this exhortation in verses 4 and 5. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. Who is who? Who is Christ. But every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. A dishonor. Okay. Verse 10. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. What Paul told the Corinthians was that no woman should prophesy or pray with her head uncovered. And no man should prophesy or pray with his head covered. Okay. Because there was confusion about that at Corinth. Maybe, as we have it in many of our churches, when people are coming in, they have head ties at the door. If you are a woman and you are coming in without a head tie, they give you, take this and tie before you come in, or don't enter and defile our church. That's the type of thing that was going on at Corinth. And then Paul addressed it. Okay. The issue that usually causes problem there is not the man covering his head, because many men don't like to cover their heads anyway. Okay. Maybe it's when we get old and then we lose some hair that maybe we look for caps to cover the head from the heat of the sun, maybe. And then when you are coming into church, you want to remove the thing and have your fresh hair. I think the problem is usually the woman. How should she come into church? That's the problem. Look at that verse 10. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Underline, a symbol of authority. So when a woman got married, a symbol was given to her. And what was the symbol? Head cover. So every married woman in those days, you had to cover your head. Okay. To show that you are married. And then if you were unmarried, don't cover your head. Okay. How should we apply this today? Baptism to River Jordan, where Jesus was baptized. Every time we have baptism, let's go, to Jordan. If we need to apply the letter, the word for word, rather than the spirit, what was going on. You know what? When I got married to my wife, I gave her a symbol of my authority. And her head is not covered today as she is in church, but she is covered by the symbol of my authority, which I gave her. Is that a symbol that she is married? Okay. So maybe if we are applying the spirit, we could follow the symbol of authority that we have in our times. That's what I'm saying. Okay. But if someone